here to help bring on the El Nino. We're having a workshop on drawing rain and snow. And the idea is, if this class goes right, it should rain tomorrow. So we're going to cross our fingers and see what we can do. So today's class actually, it comes with a safety warning, because there is actually a very dangerous element in today's workshop. There you go. And that is, we're going to be looking, among other things, at how to draw rainbows and dewdrops. And this is potentially really dangerous because it can take any perfectly good journal page and turn it into kitsch. So rainbows are great when you see rainbows, and dewdrops are a badge of honor when you're getting up early in the morning to see dewdrops and or going out after a rainstorm. But we're going to avoid just sticking them onto the side of every plant randomly. Otherwise, you kind of get into this sort of, Thomas Kincaid-esque, light as it's not really seen sort of thing. And I want to encourage people to use the journaling as a way to help you observe the world more accurately. So when you see a rainbow, you get your rainbow on. But we're going to avoid sort of sticking them into every, otherwise your journal kind of turns into like My Little Pony. So with that warning, we're going to bring on the weather. So we're going to start with lighter weather and work our way into more intense conditions. We've had in previous workshops things on drawing clouds and cloudscapes. And you can find videos of that on our YouTube channel, and also have a lot of blog posts on it. So this was a negative space approach to drawing clouds, where we were painting the blue part, and you end up with clouds by default where you didn't put those in. We looked at doing wet and wet clouds and how to get those to blend together, or even cheating using the crayon clouds. This was rubbing crayon on the paper and then putting paint over the top of that, and where the crayon was, the paint doesn't go. But that's not for today's class. Today we are going to be getting into the wet, drippy, rainy weather. So if you want to check out this sort of stuff, you can find that on johnmuirlaws.com. There's a bunch of old blog posts on that topic. But now, fog and mist. All right, so we're going to start with fog. And I want people to start by just think for a moment. When you're looking out, you're in a dense fog, and you're looking out at the landscapes around you. How does being in the fog change what you see? What should we expect to see when we're in the fog?
I think we're lines off.
All right, so you say lines may be less clear. Great. Incredibly decreased contrast. That's a big deal. So contrast is the difference between dark and light. And the further you are away in the fog, the darker the lights are, the lighter the darks are, until you're seeing distant shapes in the fog, and it's just the shape of what you're looking at, with no difference between light and dark. You'll still see that shape. So that's a biggie. What else? So changing in the color, so things getting more kind of gray. The colors are washing out of things. In addition to the contrast, we're losing the colors. And what did?
Smudged images.
All right, so you're looking, things look blurry. All right, so I'm going to encourage people to start really looking around on foggy days, and notice if, when you're looking at a distant object, are its edges ill-defined? Or is it sometimes just it's getting so pale that it's hard to see? So are the actual edges of it actually getting fuzzed out? Or are we seeing that silhouette and it's just getting paler and paler and paler? We're in fog if we're in the Bay Area all the time. And that's going to be your sort of foggy homework to start checking out. All right? So I'm going to do, in this workshop, there'll be some demos with watercolor, some with graphite pencil. We're going to start here with a watercolor demonstration. When I do watercolor stuff, I like to start just by essentially giving myself a coloring book. So I'll draw in the basic shapes, the basic lines of what I'm seeing out there. And this is a sketch of Pigeon Point Lighthouse, which is on our coast just a little bit south of here. And the fog can roll in very thickly around there. So here we are down at Pigeon Point Lighthouse, and I'm going to start just by putting in a layer of gray paint across the whole thing. And you can do this in one of two ways. One, you can pre-wet the paper, and then you don't get those lines where you're going stroke, 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 stroke. Another way that you can do this is just mix up enough paint to thoroughly cover what you're going to be looking at, and rather quickly make those strokes so that they don't have time to dry in between your brush strokes. If you put down a stroke and wait for a little while and then put down another stroke, you'll get at the edges of each of those brush strokes a very, very discernible line. If you're trying to do this and you are out in the fog, this is usually a fairly wet wash, you then have to wait for this to dry. And that's actually a real problem if you're in the fog. It's damp, there's no sun, and you're now waiting for this to dry. So one thing you can do while you're waiting for this wash to dry is just to start another sketch on the side of the paper. You're just trying to work on one sketch at a time. You end up waiting a long time, and you'll get impatient and kind of go back into there and try to put something on it when you should have waited a little bit more. Another way of doing this is if you know you're going to be going out and doing a day of sketching in the fog. Imagine this is your journal. You can, while you're having breakfast and having your morning coffee or tea, paint a series of panels of different sizes and shapes, little gray panels, little landscapito gray boxes into your journal. And you can intentionally make them different sizes, some vertically, some horizontally. You can play with the composition of those and then use those as a prompt for making little landscape sketches when you're out there. And sometimes having a bunch of these initially on your page does a couple of things. One, that white page can be kind of intimidating when you first start out. So this kind of will break in that white page. And it also then is another prompt to get you to do more of these little sketches. You might end up sketching more because like, oh, I haven't filled this one yet. You're like, what can I do? Oh, I can do that. It just gives you one more kind of kick to get your sketch on. But I want to let this dry. Before I go on. If I do something, paint on wet paper, I get very faded edges. If I put paint onto a dry surface, I get crisp edges. So another thing I'm going to be doing here is testing my colors on the side of my paper before it hits the big paper here. Sometimes if you ever put paint on, you're like, oop, I didn't want that color. I didn't know it was going to be that intense, or that, ooh, that's too blue. If you test out on the side, then when you get into your drawing, it's going to work work the way that you expect it to. In the background, I'm going really pale, and as Ashok mentioned, no contrast here. Now, as I come forward into these foreground elements, I'm going to be bringing up the contrast. I'm going to be bringing up the value, the darkness of it, and bringing more color into it. So let's take a look at that. Still not a lot of color here. But notice there's a value change, and significantly darker than that back there. For these ones, sort of in the middle ground, the closer you are to me, the more I'm getting darker and darker and darker. And now, I'm going to play with the water a little bit. One of my favorite brushes for doing water quickly is a flat water brush. So this, instead of going to a point, this is a little flat water brush. The water is held in the handle of this brush, so I dip it, I can test some little blue swatches off on the side, and then when I go into paint in here, I can use this chiseled tip. If I sort of twist in my hand, I can get wider or narrower marks in here. One trick with drawing water like this is not to fuss with it too much. The more you get in here, like, oh no, that's not right, and kind of keep getting in here and altering and changing, the more fussy this gets, the more unwater-like it is going to start to look. But if you keep it fairly simple, people will look at it and go like, ah, this is water, and they will superimpose onto it their understanding of the way that water looks. If you try to noodle out every detail, then people will go going, well, does that really look like water? Right? So very often, a quick, sort of simple treatment of water can get you through that water drawing. A lot of people are scared, oh no, I gotta draw water, how do I do that? One last bit here in the water is I want to make the close edge of this water look even closer to me. And one way I can do that is with color. So warmer colors, yellows, oranges, reds, will often feel closer to a viewer than cool colors. So if I put a little bit of yellow-green into a wave down here, it's going to pull that part of the drawing forward. So here, just a little bit of yellow-green in here. And I've also taken some white paint, that's gouache. It's like watercolor, but it's opaque. And put that simply here and here. Again, not getting into the details of foam, but just a few little blotches will suggest the feeling of those waves. Somebody will look at that and go, oh yeah, that's waves. And so keep it simple, but notice how I'm going to cover this up without that. That it really does pull that edge of the drawing forward there. So notice the value shift here, value shift, value shift. This gives you the feeling that you're going back into space, and there's this filter of fog between you and elements that are that are further back in the frame of the picture. Interestingly enough, this would also be my approach if I were drawing a snowstorm. So I'm going to have this sort of pale filter of stuff that's in the background. And in the far back, I'm not seeing snowflake, 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 snowflake. I'm just seeing these different filters between me and the stuff that's farthest back. If instead of a coastal scene, this was a pine forest with some areas of kind of open field where you kind of left it white to be snow or gray to be snow, people would look at that and they go like, oh, it's a snowstorm. But here, because it's coastal, you look at the same effect and you go, oh, it's fog. Also, with the snowstorm, what I would probably do is just take a gel pen, those little white opaque gel pens, and put a few little dots of snow, a few bigger ones and a scattering of little ones. Just a little bit of that. People look at that and they go, oh, it's snowing. Yes, those are snowflakes coming down. They see that. You don't have to fill the page with it. You're not going, right? You're just a little sprinkling of them is all you need for people to look at it and kind of go, oh, it's snow. Right? So there's our fog. And now what we're going to do is we're going to kind of up the game and get into mist. Before I do that, are there, yes?
Is there also gouache against the rock that's in the mid-foreground?
The question is there gouache against this rock here? No, that's just...
What about the other one? The one's closer to us.
So here, this going up here is just the dark rock having an edge that instead of being flat has a few of these sort of scallops of dark going up into it. Then in here, there is a little bit of gouache here, 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 and a little bit across there. One last thing I also did is I didn't want as hard of a dark graphite line around here, so I got my kneaded eraser, picked up some of that. It also lightened that a little bit. So you see that there. Like not having that kind of hard pencil edge around there. Pigeon Point Lighthouse in the fog. And now, mist. Right? Like, how on earth would you do this? Isn't that a beautiful picture? I found this online, tried to contact the photographer, Gary Hart blog, and I couldn't get through to the photographer, but I'm putting this in here anyway because I thought it was such a spectacular thing, and I hope he won't mind me putting this in the slideshow. But want people to go to his site and check out his work. Really some spectacular photography there. What I wanted people to see on this is the effect of sort of rising mist, and then think about how on earth would you draw this? We're going to look at some really nice tricks and techniques, but let's first just see what's kind of going on here. Notice that in this fog here, there's a sort of a feathered upper edge. The bottom edge, if it's behind a bunch of trees, we see these trees here very crisply. Then that feathers out behind them. And look in here in this middle ground, I can see the tops, I can see this line of trees and then the tops of some of those trees behind there. There's actually a very quick and easy way to get this sort of effect in your sketch. And you had a thought or a question?
Oh, I ran into that in Maui. Where you're looking over on the other island and there's those clouds sitting on Molokai, I think, and the shadows and there's the clouds.
All right. So, yeah, so one way of handling this is to, I'm going to draw that pine cone,
yeah,
right? Right. But let's say you wanted to do this. Let's mess with graphite and how we can kind of play with that. But really check out this. There's a number of really beautiful photographs on this website that I think you'll enjoy. So here is a quick sketch of landforms in Yosemite Valley. And what I'm going to want to do this graphite pencil drawing is not have something where I'm using lines to show the edges of these landforms. I want big areas of tone in here, of graphite, to be these shapes. So I want to go from lines to big areas of tone. So getting a softer pencil, this is a 5B pencil. You don't need something as soft as a 5B, but the demo you're about to see is with a 2B pencil. But if you're using an HB pencil or a number 2 pencil, you'll get to some mid-tone of gray. You're not going to have as much fun playing with these mist effects, because in order to get this to work, in order for the mist to be light, I need the rock and the trees to be dark. And the best way to get that is with a good dark pencil. So I'm now going to put down, with a soft pencil, a lot of graphite. Right? I want to have a really heavy graphite load on here. So I went back over it again and again and again and again and again and again, and I put some more on there, and some more on there, and there's a little groove in the paper, so you see that there. Oh dear. But keep on going, and right. So get a lot of graphite down, and push yourself to see how dark can I get that. I want to really punch in some dark. And then to fill up all these little spaces, I'm going to get a blending tool. So there are these paper blending stomps or tortillions. You get those and you can rub in here to smooth those together. So I've got not lines that we're really seeing here, but shapes, areas of tone. And this is where the fun part starts. Because now, you know those little kneaded erasers? This is where those really come into play. So a kneaded eraser does anybody have one in the room? So kneaded erasers, a lot of people are not really using them to their full effect. If I could borrow this one, great. So when you see a kneaded eraser, if yours looks like a little ball, right, you're using it the right way. If it still is that perfect rectangle like it was from the store, right, you're about to discover how to use this better. So you have to warm it up, and it's called a kneaded eraser, so people think you squeeze it in your hand like that. No, pull it like taffy. So you pull it, stretch it, pull it, and that warms it up very, very quickly. You can actually feel it get warmer and softer in your fingers. And also any dirt or graphite that's on the outside of it will get sort of mixed into the matrix of it, and it turns lighter. Ready to use. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to press and flick, press and flick, press, flick, press, wiggle, flick. That will create mist in the clouds, mist on the mountains. Right? So this is sort of a wiggle down here, then with a flick, this sort of stuff, that's the flicks. Now what's going to happen is it is so much fun to do that you'll totally overdo it like I did here. I wanted a little bit of mist, but the minute I got going with mist, I was going, wahoo! It was just so much. Look what I can do. Look, that looks so cool. And then I had mist everywhere. Right? So you then bring that little blending tool back in. You can cover up some of the mist with your blending tool. So you can add mist with the eraser. You can take mist away with the blending tool, or add even more graphite in with your pencil. So there's this middle part of this drawing where in one hand you have your pencil, in your other hand you have your kneaded eraser, in your other hand you have your blending tool. And between playing with all of those, you're adding, subtracting. It's this really dynamic part of the drawing. It's a very non-linear part of the drawing. So you'll see over the next several slides, the positions of these, what's dark, what's light. You'll see the mist sort of starting to change as you're monkeying with it. When you finally get the arrangement of mist that you want, adding and subtracting, you then can draw back in those little tree edges in front of those dark trees, in front of that mist. So I first put the graphite down, I erase out the mist, add and subtract with those two drawing tools, the blending tool and the eraser, and then I can draw my trees back in. And you see that, you get this. So I drew in one tree here, and people look at these and they go, oh, they're trees. Right? I don't have to really draw careful trees all over here, but people see that, and we think, oh, we're looking at trees. To make this mist look even brighter, the more I make the trees dark or other things dark, this will be bright if something next to it is dark. I also felt I had too much light here in the sky. And all that cool wispy effect, that's just the eraser doing it on its own. Lastly, I put in a couple of trees over here. People will see those, see that, and then read all of this as forest. Right. You don't need to get in there and draw in every tree. If you do, it'll kind of lock down the picture in detail and take a long time to do. So I can do very quick trees. I have 1, 2, 3 trees, and then we read the forest. And then these little weird marks, people will read those as trees because of that and because of that. But all that cool misty stuff, that's just the kneaded eraser. But on a matrix of having enough graphite on the page to be able to do that, and using dark enough pencils. So there will be homework with this class. If you are a graphite pencil person, your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to try 6 drawings, just messing with giving yourself more graphite on the page, and then just having fun in the middle of the drawing, adding and subtracting with the kneaded eraser, adding it back in with that blending tool. So you really start using the blending tool as a brush, adding tone in places. It's a lot of fun. All right. So now we're going to up the ante and start a rainstorm. Again, this is the dangerous zone of, also we're going to throw some rainbows in here. So just be careful. For this, we'll do a watercolor demo, again in Yosemite Valley. So you're out looking across Yosemite Valley, and different sorts of rainstorms have different feelings to them. Some are very, very heavy. Everything is just sort of gray around you, and you're just very, very wet. Sometimes it's a lighter rainstorm, and you can see through it, and you can see sort of distant clearing. So a part of what you're going to do is just sort of pay attention to what does this rainstorm look like. There's no one technique to drawing a rainstorm because everyone is different and it will change through the course of that rainstorm. But we'll look at several techniques here that you can use in drawing a rainstorm that I think you'll have a lot of fun with. The first thing I'm going to do is get that kneaded eraser and go tap, 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 tap into the middle of this to make this part here lighter. I don't want these really bold, crisp lines. Even though Half Dome is totally cool, I don't want this part to be really strong line work, or that will flatten out my drawing. With a kneaded eraser, you can easily lighten any part of a drawing without smudging or smearing it. You ever play with silly putty in newsprint when you were a kid? You press the silly putty down onto the paper and you get like the reverse image of Snoopy. So with this, you press your kneaded eraser into here and lift it straight up, and you've lightened that area of the drawing without smudging any of the graphite in there. So I've got this part here lighter, and now what I'm going to do is paint that gray, sort of wet wash of gray across the whole painting. And before, I let that dry. But this time I'm not going to do that. In fact, I want there to be a fair amount of water right here on the page. I want to be able to hold it up and kind of tilt it to the angle to the sun and see a little bit of glisten on it. So it's still a wet page, not a big puddle, but enough water so that if I then take another brush and I put a dark mark of gray across the top here, and then tilt the whole page up. Can I borrow your journal for a second? So I'm going to paint it on like this, then I'm going to tilt the journal up like that. And what will happen is paint that's up here will start to seep down the page. And so I want a fairly heavy mark up at the top of it. I want a damp page, and I will get this stroke and bleed effect. And the bleed will follow gravity. So here's stroke and bleed. And while this is still wet, I go stroke, 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 and then I just wait. And if I hold the page vertically, I will have rain that comes straight down. Could I borrow that again? But if I hold, let's see. That way, yeah, okay. If I hold my journal like this, gravity is going to pull it straight down. But my journal is now at an angle, so that then when that straight down dries and I turn my journal back, I have the rain slanting across the landscape. Did that make sense? So I'm tilting the journal to get the gravity feed to go a different way. And this is just a matter of playing with how much water is on the paper and how much paint I've got in that brush that is making the strokes that are up here. And so if you are a watercolor person, your mission is in the next few days to do 6 little studies where you just play with putting down a wash, experiment with different amounts of water on the page, and see what happens with different concentrations of strokes up here. Turn your page, you can watch it actually bleed down the page. It's really fun. You sort of feel like you're watching this rainstorm come down. But if the first time you're going to experiment with this is when you're trying to do a painting out on the land and you don't know how your paper responds, you've never tried it before, it'll lock you up. So that's why we're going to do a number of studies at home just to goof around with this technique and see how it works before we're actually out there in the field trying to make this work in a real landscape painting. So I let that come down, and then I can start working on the landscape around it. I'm going to begin with what is the furthest back, and in layers, just like we did in the fog, I'm going to start working towards you, getting increasing the contrast and the value. So in the background, even though this is half dome, it gets no detail. Forward, darker, more contrast. Another thing that you can do if your paper is a little bit heavier, some really lightweight paper you can't do this, but paper that's a little bit more durable, watercolor paper, these sorts of things, you can wet the paper and lift out some of that paint. It's called lifting out. So if I get a brush and I make this paint damp, I can then get a dry paper towel and blot that up, and I can lift out some paint in here to be the effect of rain in front of these darker rocks. So rain against the sky will be dark against light. Against the rocks, the rain will be light against dark. And this is done just by lifting out that. Some people will even go crazy with it, and they'll kind of get their brush and scrub out. Or some people even get a toothbrush and go and get a lot of that. That will tear up the surface of the paper, but you can get a lot of that stuff out. So if you know you're not going to be coming back in and doing anything in there, you can even get your toothbrush out. So I'm going to make some rain coming down from these clouds there. And then the closer I get, the darker it gets. Down here, suggesting trees just by a brush with heavy paint on it having a little jiggle in the hand as it's coming along. And that's creating this sort of sense of forest. The last thing I did here was take a little bit of green. Notice that all these trees are gray. I took a little bit of green and put it in a couple of places in here and got out a white gel pen and added rain lines. You get the feeling of sort of being there in a rainstorm. So a gel pen, does somebody have a gel pen with them? Gel pens are a great way to cheat. So the watercolor purist recoils at this thought.
What kind do you use?
So I recommend, I'm going to put up a blog post that I found on somebody else's blog where they did a survey of all their favorite types of gel pens. One that they strongly recommended was the Jelly Roll. I know the Jelly Roll is one really good kind. There's one other. Ashok, do you remember what the other?
The Sakura Jelly Roll, the Uniballs, and then this one. This is the Presto. That's the big one for like when I really scrub. This is the one that's used the most.
Wow, that's cool. So he's this is Ashok's collection. Oh, by the way, some of the folks on the video said, we want to see this guy who's behind the camera, the man who's been doing all the filming. Could we get you to come forward, Ashok? This is Uncle Ashok Khosla, videographer for the Nature Journal Club. We really, so people in across the pond are really appreciative of your. Ladies and gentlemen, Ashok Khosla, thank you very much. And so these are Ashok's collection of white gel pens, and what it does is allow you to draw white lines on dry watercolor paper. How cool is that? Right? And Ashok, I have to try one of these. That looks really neat. The Presto. I'll give it a try.
I have a
Keep it,
little,
I have another one.
I have a quick little trick for reconstituting those ones when they dry up, because you know sometimes they dry up and then.
Oh, they dry up all the time.
And so this is a trick from Jenny Keller.
Okay, hold on. I'm going to make sure that I get my mic near you so we hear this. So,
Okay.
everybody listen. This is because here's the problem. You have a gel pen. You've been using it for a month. You come back. There's still tons of stuff inside of it, and it dries up. They tend to dry up super fast. So here is a recommendation. So introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Jen.
Hi, Jen.
So I have a trick taught to me by Jenny Keller of the Science Illustration Program at CSUMB. She recommends using a wet paper towel to draw on at first, just to roll the ball on the wet paper towel, and then it will wake it up.
Ah. So she says, draw on a wet paper towel, and then you can bring your deceased pen back to life. Yep.
For you.
For me?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah, try it.
Hey, thank you very much. I just got a Christmas present. Thank you. Here you get the sense you're looking through the storm, and it's sort of starting to clear out there. Had you started with a kind of heavier, just gray background, you'd feel like you're just deep in an unrelenting storm. Or here, I just took some gray paint, mixed it into a loose mixture, and painted that across the whole thing, and made this, an even heavier storm. But the sense that you get with it just sort of just depends on how much of that gray background you initially put in. But there you have the stuff in the background getting lighter. All right. And now the rainbow. So, rainbow, you will only see a rainbow when the sun is out behind you. The sun is directly behind you, and if you drew a line between the sun, your skull, and the center of the rainbow, right? That's where the rainbow is going to appear. So rainbows are always behind you. So don't draw a rainbow with side lighting on rocks, right? The light is always going to be directly behind you in a rainbow. For this here, we're out in a marsh landscape here, and a storm has come through and passed, and we're going to have a rainbow across the sky here. It's interesting, there are a couple of things about rainbows, a few observations that will help you draw them accurately. One thing I want to point out, though, is that in this little pencil sketch of the marsh, a couple of things that I'm doing here that might be worth noticing. One is, notice that in these close islands here, I've got some vertical hatching marks suggesting rushes or tules. But look out in this back field here in the back 40. As you look back there, I'm just using a vanishing point here with some hatching lines, sort of shading lines for that radiate out from that point. That gives you this feeling that you're looking out at this big, vast plain. So that little kind of vanishing point on the ground there, even if there's no plowed field there, if those marks show through, they'll help people sort of think of that as a flat plain. When I first did this sketch, I made just vertical hatched lines back there, and it just looked like there was a wall there. And I erased those and put it in this way. And I went, oh yeah, I like that better. So that might be something to notice. Coat of gray paint. And while it's still wet, drop in a few slash and bleeds. So that's starting to come down there. All right, that's all the paint doing it itself. So you have to just trust it and just wait, and you wait, and you wait, and you wait, and you wait. And now we're going to start to put in the rainbow in here. It turns out that the way we think rainbows should look is a little bit different than the way we do. And sometimes there's a danger of we draw the symbol that's in our head, because we all know that, okay, it's an arc, and it's Roy G. Biv, right? Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. And so you draw in the arc, and then you start drawing the red and orange, yellow. By the way, is it red at the top or red at the bottom? Red at the top, okay. We'll take a look at a photograph of a real rainbow here. And what is really surprising? Okay, so first there's a secondary rainbow, and notice that in that, so they're reversed back there, all right? And then also look at how bright it is under here. Right, so light from here is getting scattered down into this zone. That makes it brighter under the rainbow. So if I want it brighter under my rainbow, I'm going to draw an arc and make it darker on top. So draw an arc carefully. I'm not going to do it like this. All right. I want to think of the rainbow as that circle. Remember, the anti-solar point, the part that's directly opposite your head, is here. That is probably going to be underground unless you're up on top of a mountain looking down. Because the sun so you've got sun, your head, that anti-solar point down there. And if the sun is down here to get that anti-solar point above the horizon, then the sun is already set. Right? You're not getting sun. It's nighttime. Why are you drawing a rainbow?
Did you get it lighter by lifting out?
No, so what I did is, we'll just go back to that last one. You'll see lighter here. I'm putting in the arc and drawing the dark around it. Now, I'm going to draw in this is a trick that I learned in a book by James Gurney, the person who did the Dinotopia books. Wonderful illustrator. And one of the things that he suggested in his book, he said when you're drawing a rainbow, he said just underpaint it. Underpaint it first. And that way you can get the bright rainbow to pop out. I was like, you rock. I mean, the guy's just genius. He's got this book, what is it called? Imaginative Realism. That is really neat. The other one is on drawing light. What is the name of that one?
Magic or something like that.
So yeah, the one on drawing light rocked my potato patch. This came out of that. He's got all these different aspects of light, and he's got this cool science brain. And he sort of breaks it down like for the geeks out there, like we want to understand. We don't just want to draw it, we want to understand why. And he'll help us understand why and draw it really well. What's the name of the book?
Color and Light, a guide for the realist painter.
Color and Light, a guide for the realist painter. You know, run, don't walk. Get this book. It's brilliant, right? So this was his idea. He said, just draw that. Okay, like, okay, cool, James. And so in the field back here, foreground, notice I've got some color in that. Background, that's sort of a brownish, okay, but we read this as all the same sort of material. I want warm colors up close. If I put these warm colors all the way to the background, it would flatten out the picture. I'm going to embellish these marsh edges a little bit, putting a dark line along the boundary between water and rushes, and put in a little bit of the reflection of those rushes. I'm going to leave most of the water white. So water does not have to be blue. And now I'm going to put my color in. All right? So we want to think of what are the colors doing in rainbows. And we have a tendency to kind of go like, all right, I know it should be this Roy G. Biv thing. So by the way, putting in the colors with colored pencil, much easier than watercolor. Yeah, so I grab my colored pencils, but I get my red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. I start to put those in. That's a lot of little pencil lines, and it's going to crash and burn. All right, so how do you do it? Well, let's take a look at a rainbow. Is this real or fake?
Fake.
How do you know?
Because the secondary rainbow colors are not flipped.
Ah, so the secondary is not flipped. Anything else?
The arc is too murky.
Yeah.
Right? The anti-solar point is well above the horizon.
It's lit under both the things.
Yeah. So, yep, so in the real rainbow, between the two, if you have a double rainbow, you actually have a dark band, the band of Alexander, Alexander's band. It's actually darkest in between them, and lighter here and lighter there. So we don't have that going on. Much too thick. But also notice here we've got blue, we've got green, we've got yellow, we've got orange, we've got red. You've got all those little steps that you're seeing. All right? Let's take a look for a moment at a real rainbow. What's weird about the order of these colors? What do you see?
The red is really thick and you just see the yellow.
Yeah, where's the yellow? Where's my yellow? We've got a big red-orange zone up here. There's no yellow strip. Isn't that weird? And then a bright green strip, and then there's sort of a broad blue-purple zone. Huh. We zoom in on it even more. Maybe you could like pick out some pixel in here that you're going to call yellow, but it seems to me by the time you've stopped being green, you're already being orange. All right? And look at how thick that is. Wow. That's really, really weird. So this is taken from NOAA's website. This is their image of the spectrum of visible light projected. And holy smoke, there's a big green section. They're calling that yellow? The spacing of these isn't even. It's not red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. All right. We've got this big yellow-orange section, a green section, and a bluish section. So my recommendation is that this is one of these less is more things. Don't put in every stripe of color, right? But instead, sort of average this into, get yourself a little red-orange. The green shows up really well, and then some blue-purple, and you're going to be doing much better. So rainbow, do the James Gurney underpainting, and then I draw on top of that. So that's 3 colors, but your brain thinks it's seeing yellow. There's actually a light green in there. There is a orangish red, and there's a blue. But if you get more lines in there, you drive it into the ground. Right. It's a thinner band than we would expect it to be. Also, here you see that band of Alexander very nicely. Rainbows are beautiful. Rainbows are cool. But we want to spend a little bit more time, actually look at what they're doing. Now we're going to go let it snow, let it snow, let it snow. If we want snow to look bright and white, what do we put next to it? Something dark. So the big trick for snow, for getting your snow to look snowy, is you want contrast. You can put shadows all over your snow. You can have all sorts of stuff, interesting stuff going on in the snow. As long as there's something that's really dark, you can really make it feel like snow. But that white feels white because the dark feels dark. And snow can reflect back to you much brighter white than you can ever get with your paper. And so sometimes you have to overemphasize the darkness of other elements. It's kind of like drawing a sunset. If you put in all the colors of the sky, in order to make those sky colors look luminous, you have to hyper darken the ground. And so a big part of this is going to be contrast. I'm going to start with a little graphite pencil drawing here, distant middle ground trees here. Notice that this strip of trees doesn't go right through the middle of the drawing, so compositionally I'm trying not to cut the drawing in half. Mostly sky, some snow, so mostly some and a little. Right. And I want this tree edge to be consistently inconsistent. I avoid the dragon tooth tree thing, right? The spaces between here are irregular. The heights of the trees are irregular. I want to be consistently inconsistent. Then to make this look a little bit deeper, I'm going to add a few little dark wedges coming down into the forest. So here's with the extra dark, without, with. What I'm doing is imagine I have a tree here, there's a tree here, and then here's my tree line in the background. Notice that the shape between these two trees is a downward pointing triangle. So if I put downward pointing triangles here and here, I'm actually carving this tree by putting the wedge of dark behind it. So I will often have some tree line here, and what I'll do is find places where I will make little downward facing triangles into that, and that forms just the suggestion of there being trees in the front. So take a look at on my blog. There is sort of you go to johnmuirlaws.com. Over on the left-hand side it says blog. You pull that down to blog archives. Go to this thing on drawing coniferous trees, and you'll see this in a little bit more detail. So look sort of in here, and you'll see this downward pointing arrow. And that gives you the suggestion of trees that are some in front, a little bit, some in back. Now I'm going to get out my blending tool and smudge all this together. And also add a little bit of gray into the sky. So with that smudging tool, you're not just blending this stuff. You can paint with it, because it gets graphite on the tip of it. So I can paint that sky and paint just a couple of little grooves in the snow dunes. Now, in order to make this snow look really bright, what do I need? Contrast. So I'm going to punch in dark contrast next to them. Look at how much brighter the snow now feels, because there's dark trees. Little animal path through here helps you kind of get a sense for the direction of the snow. And now I'm going to have a lot of fun. Right? If you have a fine-tipped eraser, you can go to town, because what it allows you to do is to draw both with your pencil, and you can draw with your eraser. So this is different than the kneaded eraser, where I'm going to try to generally blotch out, lift. This stuff is on here a little bit harder. I need to get in there with a tight little tip, and I'm going to put snow on these trees. And it's just going to take a matter of seconds. So I'm first going to make a series of blotches down the middle. Branches out to the side, you're going to see snow on top of them, a long thing going out to the side. But the branches that are coming towards you, that snow is just making a lump pointing towards you. So it's lumps in the middle and lines of snow out to the sides. So lumps in the middle, and then lines of snow out to the sides. And bam, it feels like there's snow on trees. That would be a different demo.
Right.
So what you could do is do this, right? And then with your watercolor, just add a little bit of tint into some of those places in the trees. That would be an easy way to do it.
Lifting out?
No, just bringing, keep it sort of dark in there in the trees. Just a little hint that there's some greenness in there, and whatever color you want to bring into that sky. You could actually, I'll often do a watercolor drawing on top of a graphite pencil drawing. Working around these, if I were doing this with watercolor, another way to do this would be to put gouache, which is an opaque watercolor. So in my little sketch kit, I've got a glob of sort of dried white gouache there. Or I could try that. I could try Ashok's little marker here. Whoops. And see how that did. Would this work? No, not on the whiteboard. But would it work on my watercolor?
Yeah, sure.
So Ashok says you could put, you could add snow in with that that little Presto. So I'm going to give that a try. Maybe I'll give that play with that at home, and I'll post something online. Let's take a look though at a watercolor of with snow, of a snow scene. In that, I want folks first just to think a little bit about the color of shadows on snow. There's a tremendous amount of actually blues and purples and odd colors that show up in the shadows in snow. Here's a neat photograph of shadows on snow. This is a photograph taken by a woman who lives off the grid, alone in remote wilderness of British Columbia, and goes out and explores around and reports on all her findings and adventures. Totally cool. This is her website. She's got a satellite hookup to be able to give us these blog posts of her discoveries and experience. So if you go to wildernessdweller.ca, you can catch up on all of her adventures in the woods. Very, very, very cool. But this is a photograph that she took these are straight shadows of trees, but if they're going across uneven ground, the shadows show us the changes in the undulations of the snow surface. So that's something that you can really look for as you're hiking around in the snow on your little snowshoes, trudge, trudge, trudge. Look for places, these sort of beautiful calligraphy that's made by shadows on snow. Right. So we're going to do a little demo playing with that. Here are some aspen trees on a slope. And by the way, you don't have to draw the entire aspen. If you like these cool things of the shadows on the ground, make a little sketch of that. So you don't have to, some people say, like, I want to draw these trees with these aspen. If you like that stuff going on there on the ground, make a drawing of that. Draw what you're interested in. Don't feel like you have to I'm going to draw everything. If you're interested in that, you draw that. So the trees that are closest to you are bigger, and their bases are closer to the bottom of the drawing plane, right? Of the picture plane here. And as they go up, they're getting further away. They're also getting smaller. I'm going to put the sort of aspen trees have these cool markings on the bark. My favorites are these sort of bird eye things. Kind of look like a bird flew into the side of the tree on the downstroke. That's where the birds actually, when birds hibernate, they hide in aspen trees. And so these are the marks that are made by the birds actually flying into the trees, embedding themselves in the wood, because in the spring they come back out through those holes. So you see, that's when you see the birds again. That's why birds, you don't see them in wintertime, because they've all embedded themselves in aspen trees. It's pretty cool. So you can look for those marks on aspens. All right? I'm sure it is. Really? You learn the most amazing things here. Now I am going to, now let's put some shadows on these trees. So really let yourself go with the shadows. In order to kind of get that contrast that they have, you have to push the contrast of those shadows, because the white of snow is actually brighter than anything your paper can do. And you get a lot of blues in those shadow colors, and don't be timid, don't be shy about them. Another thing that's going to make this feel bright is by having just take your hand and cover up that little dark area up there. And notice that really kind of helps you see that snow as being bright, having some dark that it's relative to. And then on the trees, there's often a little bit of a yellowish, greenish hue to aspen bark. So I'm going to put that on. Actually, it's really fun with aspen trees. If you, just with your fingernail, you lightly scratch just a millimeter below the surface of this white, there's this thick layer of green chlorophyll-containing tissue right underneath that little papery white or out surface. So they actually photosynthesize through their trunks. Go aspen, all right? So there is our kind of aspen in winter. Contrast is your friend. Shadows describe the shape of the slope. And so you can just do a little study of that which you're interested in, but really play with how you can kind of explore that contrast. And then you never know who's going to come out to play there. So here, just pumping up the darkness on these. So less contrast, nice. More contrast, right? You see again, more birds coming into the trees. And there you have it. And then Amelia can help you finish the drawing. So she told me that, Daddy, this is Rosalind Franklin for you. Rosalind Franklin. So Rosalind Franklin, you may wonder who Rosalind Franklin is. So Rosalind Franklin, right? Anybody know who she was?
DNA.
Yeah, she's the woman who figured out the structure of DNA. She actually photographed DNA and sent the photograph to Watson and Crick, this photograph of the double helix. They looked at it and went, oh, it's a double helix. We should publish that, right? And so everybody knows Watson and Crick, as the people who figured this out, they could not have done it without Rosalind Franklin, but she was snubbed in the Nobel Prize. So that's Rosalind Franklin going for a walk in the woods. So thank you, Amelia.
She draw on your
She's got mad skills.
Yeah, she does.
Yeah. So, all right. Again, do high kitsch potential. Be careful with it, right? All right, who knew? So, so here's the approach, and it's actually really, really easy to do. And you just spend a little bit of time. You can test this for yourself. Next time you've got a post rainstorm or do it again. If this class goes well, it will rain tomorrow. So the reason we're doing this is to try to make it rain. So if this works, it's gonna rain tomorrow. But you sit down after the rainstorm and just pull up a chair and start staring at raindrops on things. And it is really, really fun to see what they do. And so here I'm going to put down a little bit. This will be on a leaf. You could also do it on a rose petal. Some types of paint sit on the surface and you wet them and you can lift them out really easily. Other types of paint are very staining. And when they're on the paper, they're not going away. So phthalo green, for instance, will just lock into the paper. But a lot of other greens, you get that little spot wet and tap it with a paper towel. And you can lift off little circles of color. There's still a little bit of color behind there, and I want that. I want a little bit of that showing through. Even though raindrops are transparent, they still cast a shadow because they bend light. So they bend the light that is coming into them, and it doesn't all just go straight through. So the light is bent, so the raindrop casts a shadow. So if the sun is coming from here, the raindrop will create a shadow crescent on the other side of that. And then here comes the really counterintuitive part. We're used to this idea that if the sun is coming from here, you're going to have the light side and the dark side of an object, right? The dark side is, perhaps on the side that is not facing towards the light, right? So we're used to the dark side being facing away from the light. But on a transparent object, it's actually the exact opposite. So the darkest side of the raindrop is going to be on the side facing towards the light. And the lightest side of the raindrop is going to be on that side adjacent to the shadow. So it's as if the light is coming through and you're seeing it pooling over here. I want to find a physicist who will sit down with me and kind of make little arrow diagrams showing me what's happening with the light bouncing around in there. But this is what you see. It's really, really cool. And what that also does, this being the darker side, it adds a place for more contrast, for that's also where the highlight or the reflection of the object that is making the light will go on it. So there's your highlight in the dark side. So the highlight's in the dark side. And then the shadow is adjacent to the light side. Isn't that convenient? So that makes, I mean, if it was the other way around, then this dark side would make this less contrasty and the highlight would be less contrasty. But it's just perfectly designed for illustrators who need contrast, right? So, also, if the raindrop sticks up really high, you sometimes see light that comes through the raindrop and then is projected to a little spot on the other side of the raindrop. Another kind of fun thing to look for. So you get yourself into, if you have those close focus binoculars, right? Just you sit yourself down and you start looking at raindrops. You're like, oh my gosh, this is so much fun. So I'll post a little sketchbook page that I did of a morning spent just staring at raindrops up in the Sierra Nevada. It's really, really fun to do, and you owe yourself some raindrop peeping. So should we get a good storm, go out and get your raindrop on. It's really interesting to see what they do. One other thing that's really neat, if you've ever done this, maybe it's just me, you take a piece of saran wrap or a plastic bag, and you put it down on a book, and then get a drop of water and put it onto that little piece of plastic. And then you start moving that little piece of the saran wrap around on top of the text. And what do you see? It's a magnifier. It makes this little magnifier. So you're moving that around and you're magnifying the stuff that's underneath there. It's really neat. So if there are perhaps veins or striations on the leaf surface that you're looking at, those will be magnified or spaced further apart when you're looking through the raindrop. All right? So that is the raindrop trick. So in just really, really quickly again, if this is my raindrop, I've got a crescent of dark on one side. I have a darker area on the other side, and I have a highlight in that. And then magnified whatever is inside.
How did you paint the highlight?
All right, so gouache. So gouache or gel pen, or I'll bet you could even use the Presto. All right. So that is the dewdrop trick. All right. Oh, that is white colored pencil. So it is a white Prismacolor pencil. I'm imagining that this is perhaps a leaf surface, like a part that it might be, say, raindrops on a grass blade that has those little striations in it. So any sort of structure on the surface of the leaf, or if there are sort of if you can see veins going across on a leaf making a network, those are going to be magnified inside. So those were just sort of a substrate to sort of show us magnification.
So the light source is coming from?
The light source is, you're going to draw a line. It's going to go from the highlight, and that's going to line up with that shadow on the other side.
I thought so.
Yeah. All right. Now, important Nature Journal Club news. We're going to have an art show. We want to show people the beauty of biodiversity of the San Francisco Bay Area through our journal pages, and also just sort of the fun that we can have getting out into the field and observing and sketching. So all members of all ages, of all experience levels are invited to join and to participate. And all you have to do is take stuff that you think is either interesting or you like for one reason or another, and each member can have up to 3 pieces in the show, right? And what you're going to do is bring your artwork already framed, ready for hanging, so there's the wire on the back, to our next field trip. And at that field trip, which is going to be to the Tilden Nature Center, we'll drop stuff off there, fill out a little bit of paperwork, and then the next day a group of us are going to come and hang the show, and it will be in the rotunda of the Tilden Nature Center for the next 2 months. And we will have an opening event with all sorts of yummy potluck food and shenanigans going on there, but it's going to be a really, really terrific show. I know there's some people that are thinking, oh, right, I'm ready to go. And other people are thinking, well, that's great. Maybe I'll do this next year. I need to get myself a little bit better. Next year, your brain is going to be telling you exactly the same thing, right? And so what I want to really encourage people to do is to realize that this idea of not good enough is just something, it's a kind of ghost that hangs around with all of us and is always going to be there, right? And what we have to do to get past it is just intentionally move past it. To realize that what you've got can really electrify somebody else. It's so cool to look through other people's journals and sketchbook pages. You want other people to have a chance to peek into your brain and see what fun it is to get your journal out and get your journaling and sketching on. It doesn't have to be your best stuff. It has to be stuff that you, for one reason or another, either because of its content or how it artistically turned out, that for some reason or another resonates with you. And it doesn't have to be a pretty picture. It could be something that's really, really interesting. And it didn't end up being a pretty picture, but you discovered something really cool that day, right? And they'll have a little blurb where you can describe that. That's what we want to have in this show. And I want to encourage everybody here to do it. The first time that you put yourself up in a show, it is terrifying. And I really want to acknowledge that. It is scary. But part of putting yourself out there is going to make it so much easier for you to put other stuff out in the future and to be able to journal and sketch and draw in a much less self-conscious way. Because look, I already did that and I put it up in the show, but that was terrifying to me. Now, actually being over here in my journal, it's a little bit less threatening. And you'll find that by sharing your work, you not only inspire others, but you help get that voice that says, we're not worthy. I'm not good enough. Who do I think I'm kidding? I'm not, there's always going to be somebody that's going to be doing some piece of artwork that is going to be better than anybody else's. It's not a competition. We're not lining ourselves up. We're celebrating the process of thinking on paper. We're celebrating the process of being alive and recording our experiences in the pages of journal in a way that makes real meaning for us. And by sharing what you did with other people, you're going to make it more of an invitation for everybody else to do the same thing. And you will find that it will make it easier for you to sketch in the future. So I really want to encourage everybody to participate. So what you do is you show up at the Tilden Nature Center. It's from 10 to 4. We're going to have our field trip, have a fantastic potluck lunch partway through. There'll be a few little lessons, time to get out in nature and observe and sketch and draw. We'll also have our lunch and do some logistics for the show, and it will be a ton of fun. And a great way to start 2016 off with getting, you're only 3 days into it and you're already kind of getting your journaling on. This is your 2016, your journaling is going to explode, right? If you let it. And one way you can do that is just by diving in. By the way, 2 field trips in January. So one at the start, that's December's field trip, and one at the end of January. That's January's field trip. Yes, it's a blue journal trip. So it's the blue journaling trip. So I want to encourage everybody to come to our blue journaling trip. The pieces want to be framed and ready to hang. If you cannot get there for that field trip, all you have to do is contact me and say, I really want to be in the show, and we'll find out a way to get your stuff to me. And by the way, if you're somebody who's watching this video from somewhere else in the country or anywhere else in the world, and you can get your work to me, by the way, my address is on my website, johnmuirlaws.com. There's a contact link there. Contact me. We'll try to get even some international stuff in the show. That would be a total hoot. We would love to have you there. So I want to encourage everybody to give it a try. Dive in. You can do this. Right? You've been doing it in your journal. Now it's time to open up the pages of those journals, and we're going to share them with the larger community. Original artwork preferred, right? And and another thing you can do is we'll have, for some folks, you don't want to take that picture out of your journal, we'll have a display case where we can take a few journals, open them up to a page, and we'll have those also on display.
There's also some really nice shadow boxes at Palace Art in
But I'm going to come over here and put my little speaker next to you. Say this again?
There are some really nice shadow box frames at Palace Arts in Santa Cruz.
Right, so those are thick frames that you can put your journal in. And bam, you are ready to go. So just you put it in, slide in, that easy? Zip, 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 done.
Yep.
You heard it here. So zip, 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 done. We're in the show. So I want to compliment everybody on a year of sketching dangerously. It takes courage to try to do something, to challenge yourself, to work creatively, to do something new. And just as you're sitting here, just flip through your journal and look at where you've come from. Take a moment to acknowledge that to yourself, pat yourself on the back, and this coming year, it is going to even blow the roof off 2015. But just sort of scan back there and look at where you've come. You've really opened up some really wonderful opportunities to yourself, and it's only going to get better. So I hope that this workshop was helpful to you, and I will see you in the field.